you told me that I shouldn't cry, and what I always thought was that crying was weakness, and you don't show weakness to people.
Welcome to Fatherhood, breaking the toxic cycle. Dive in as real dads bear all the mess ups, make ups, and every heartfelt moment in between. Tune in. It's raw, it's real, and it might just change the way you see family.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Fatherhood, breaking the toxic cycle. And I have a special guest today, and that's my oldest daughter, Alyssa. And today we're going to be sharing our journey as she was growing up, and then also the process of healing over the last couple of years. And I say healing because we're still in the process of healing. So get ready for a good one, because this right here is going to be an all-out, truly raw, unedited addition to Fatherhood, breaking the toxic cycle. Welcome, Alyssa. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm okay.
So you ready to do this? This has been a long time in the making, and we're finally here.
Yeah. I'm a little nervous. I don't know where this is going to go.
It's going to go wherever it's meant to go. You know, the whole purpose of this podcast is going to be to help people as they start to repair their relationships with their children. So maybe you can just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just start from there. Who are you? Where did you come from?
See, I don't do well with unscripted. You didn't tell me you were going to ask me to talk about myself. Like, what am I supposed to say?
Whatever you want. This is not going to get cut, so.
No, it is going to get cut or I'm not doing this podcast.
Okay.
Christian, it's going to get cut, right? Because I'm not doing this fucking podcast.
Okay.
What am I supposed to say?
Just who you are, what you do for a living, and
know. God damn it.
Come on, sparkle. Or glitter.
Glitter, sparkle. That's a good one. I do sparkle.
Well, we'll just go ahead and dive in.
I'm frozen.
So
okay.
you have to edit this in. Okay.
God damn it, like where's when I laugh when I get in bed. Okay.
All right. So what we'll do is we'll start from the beginning.
Okay. But I'm going to introduce myself.
Oh, absolutely. Okay.
What did you think was going to happen? You would have laughed your fucking ass. Hey, you knew this was going to happen because I don't do well with unscripted. At least a guide. My name's Alyssa. I can't.
Okay.
Oh,
Let's start from the beginning. So,
wait, I'm going to introduce myself.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to start because I can't. I don't know. Christian, line. Line. Oh, okay. Shut up. Okay. My name's Alyssa, and I don't know. Actually, I honestly don't know. Can we just do this?
My name's Alyssa. I'm 27 years old. Excited to be here to share my story.
Don't push it. Okay. My name's Alyssa. I'm 27. And I'm excited. Yeah, if I thought I could be an actress, I can't.
All right, so let's start from the beginning.
Okay. My name's Alyssa. I'm 27. I am the oldest daughter of 2 younger siblings, so all girls. That's been fun. I went to school for psychology and graduated partially because of the things that happened growing up and also the people around me, different influences that I've seen on a lot of adolescents, really pushed me to want to study in that I currently operate in the crazy world of real estate right now, but I'm glad that I'm here and excited to see where this goes.
Wow, that introduction was a quick jab into psychology and how you grew up. This is really starting off powerful.
Well, it's a good context background.
Absolutely. So, why don't you share a little bit about your childhood growing up, maybe the early years?
Um, um, Early years, I had a good childhood. We went a lot of places. It was just me for the first 6 years. So I would say that I was quite spoiled and I became accustomed to that. But there was a lot of shuffling around when I was a kid. So I don't know. I don't really remember too much of having both parents in one place as much.
Okay. And, one of the things that came up not too long ago is a memory that you brought to the surface of how, when you were younger, you weren't allowed to cry. And not only did it, was it towards you, but it was also towards your sisters. Can you share a little bit about that, about why you weren't allowed to cry?
So that would have came a little bit like in probably middle childhood. Um, well, because you told me that I shouldn't cry, and what I was taught was that crying was weakness, and you don't show weakness to people, was being the biggest thing of you have to be strong and not show that vulnerable part of you.
And that right there was a big part of my narcissist behavior, of not wanting my girls to show any emotion because I never showed emotion and I didn't want them to cry. And if they did, they would get punished. And now, in retrospect, looking back, I know that was the wrong way to parent. But at the time, it was something that I felt was in the best interest of, my girls to become strong, independent, young adults. Now, tell me a little bit about just what life was like. I know there was a lot of chaos in the house, a lot of highs and lows. What do you remember as a child growing up?
Oh man, we're really getting into this. Okay. um, I do remember early childhood. There were a lot of highs and lows, so I would say that I had a very good childhood. I was provided with a lot of things. I never had to worry or had any insecurities as far as having roof over my head or food to eat. But the highs came from being around the family and being able to do things, but the lows came from whenever dad was upset and you would lash out, or you would just be toxic around the house, or you would start throwing things.
Now, what does that mean about I was toxic around the house, throwing things? What does toxic mean to you? Because
Well,
I can
do you
think
really
of,
want to get into this?
I just want to share to help other fathers heal the relationship because I'm sure I'm not the only one that was a toxic father.
Okay. So on the outside, I grew up with a father that provided for me, that took care of his family, but on the inside, uh, I also had a father that drank and who would get um, angry and wasn't the best drunk. He was a little controlling or possessive over my mother. And there was a little bit of fear there when those situations would come up.
And how did that impact you as a child? You were fear, hurt. What
What
kind of emotions do you remember?
what overstimulated me. So it was an overstimulation of early on, I learned to be afraid and I learned to hide. And I learned that when stuff like this happens, then mom's going to pack up everything and we're going to leave. Or we're going to call my grandmother, being your mom, to come calm down the situation. And I mean, I couldn't do anything about it.
I guess, now in retrospect, it's kind of funny, but it was almost like the great escape when I went into one of my narcissistic meltdowns. And then it's like, oh crap, like crap's going to happen now. and everybody hide, everybody pack their stuff and jump out the windows, run out the back door, and have a safe place to go. Is that pretty does that kind of summarize what things look like growing up as a child in the
Right?
early days?
Yeah, I guess a little bit.
And what did that do to you? Just knowing that me as a father was very short tempered and very easily able to get triggered emotionally and psychologically, really just go for the gut to really hurt you emotionally and psychologically.
I mean, I really didn't see much of that until maybe more of the middle to late childhood, and then definitely as a teenager, that became more prevalent. It helped me put up this wall, and I also became an anxious child. And I also felt a loss of control, which I then needed control. So I would then bully my sisters because I didn't feel like I had control.
And what did not having control look like to you?
I don't know, just not being able to do anything about it, only being able to leave when mom wants to leave, not being able to calm down the situations or even make sense about what's going on. I'm feeling powerless.
What would you say to other kids that are experiencing a situation where maybe they have a toxic father, narcissist father, and they're going through this? So you're a little girl, elementary school, going into junior high school, and you have no control. What advice would you give them?
I would tell them to create a safe place, to if they can talk to one of their parents and explain how they're feeling, that would be something to. A lot of it is you have to be able to talk to somebody to understand these emotions, but sometimes that's hard because if you talk to somebody outside of the home, it could be taken the wrong way. They could think something else is going on. It could have consequences. I would recommend them to create a safe place for themselves, somewhere where they can go. I tuned out to music. That was my escape. That's why I love music, because it got me through so much stuff.
Well, so music was your escape to
Music was my escape.
You brought up something at the beginning is, you had a good life at the beginning, early years. And I think a part of that was the way I showed my love was by buying things. And there was, we always had the big house, pool, and you always had things, but I was always working. I wasn't there. And in my mind, I justified it as, but I'm working, I'm providing, you know? And looking back in retrospect, it's like, you wanted me there as a father. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
So it's more than just providing a roof and food and clothes and everything, especially when it comes to girls. You have to address the emotional aspect because girls have a lot more emotions than boys do. But even with boys too, you have to be a present father. And by you not being there, I just missed my dad. I just wanted him to be around. And the times when you were around, sometimes you were working. So it was kind of like that. Dad's here, but he's not really present. And he's kind of shooing me away because he's working.
And now looking at that, I realized what a big disservice that was because, like you said, a lot of times I was there physically, but I wasn't there psychologically or mentally because I'm either on the phone or quiet down. I'm trying to handle this call, or I've been reminded of going to like school events and taking my paperwork on my laptop and plugging in a hotspot and thinking, but I'm there, what are you guys complaining about? But now realizing that there was a lot more damage happening by being present physically and not psychologically than just not being there at all.
Well, I can remember, it's funny that you bring that up. I can remember my choir recital that I had in high school, and I was so excited for everybody to be there. And I had worked for weeks on our solo pieces, on the class pieces, And I remember you taking out your magazines. And I was just like, is he freaking serious right now? Like, it kind of did devastate me a little because, yes, after you said, well, I was paying attention when I did my solo with my group. And I was like, but that's not the point. I worked for weeks on these other songs. It took hours, it took days and weeks for us to just learn to sing in unison. And you weren't even paying attention to all of that. Or when we used to go to baseball games and you would have magazines and you weren't really present. Or we'd go on car rides and you would tell everybody to be quiet because you have to take a phone call. Or we'd have to wait for you to come to the dinner table because you were doing something or you were working.
So just those minor things, but to me, they were minor, but they were major to you as children, to you and your sisters, and even your mom. And so it did kind of hit hard.
Yeah, it impacts a child because you're showing them that even though you're there, you're not physically present. And that makes an impact because you have to think about it. To you, yes, you've come home from a busy day. Maybe you've been working all day and you've been out of the house and you've gone through whatever situations. But you've been focused on something else. For children, there is not much for them to focus on, especially when they're younger, other than maybe school, playing, depending if there's TV allowed in the home, whatever it is. They're just excited to see you. They've been waiting for their parent to come home. So we don't know what's going on at work. We don't know what you finished or unfinished, what you're bringing home. We're just excited to see you, but then you're not present. Or we're excited to go on a trip, but then you're not actually there mentally.
You know, just to kind of shift a little bit, to kind of piggyback on that. I remember your mom sharing something. I grew up with Tourette's and didn't know I have Tourette's. And I remember I would get punished for having Tourette's. Then my mom would bribe me. If you stop doing those tics, by matter of fact, they bought me a guitar. If I would stop doing my tics, that only lasts about 2-3 days and I was back at it again. But I learned to deal with it by just like mind over matter, kind of just trying to control it as best as I could. And I know growing up, I didn't want to acknowledge that you guys had Tourette's. And I remember when your mom would say, no, we need to get them tested. I was fighting it because I didn't want that to be a crutch. And, I didn't want you guys to go ahead and say, oh, well, I'm talking back because it's my Tourette's. Oh, I'm rolling my eyes because it's my Tourette's. And I know that was a very bumpy time as we started transition from the Tourette's really going full steam and then getting to that point of acceptance. Do you remember that? How did it?
I remember my mom being completely supportive and not so much you. I do remember you telling me mind over matter and, having to control it. But what also stood out to me is I realized that it wasn't something that I had to control. And sometimes these tics would be coming out when I wouldn't even be knowing that I'm doing them. And my mom was very gentle about the way that she would handle the situation and ask me and not make me feel embarrassed. But then with you, it's like I had to have some type of a sense of control over it, which I didn't, because it would come out, especially when my emotions got heightened, like I was excited or I was angry. But I used to get bullied really badly in school before I knew what it was. And I used to get, picked on because I used to do these things. And I remember they were called bad habits. You used to tell me I have bad habits. So that's what I would tell them. It's just a bad habit I have. Not until I finally got tested. And now I knew what it was and it had a name. The funny thing is when I told my bullies that I had Tourette's, that it's a neurological disorder, they backed off right away. They were like, oh, whoa. Like, I remember this one little boy, he used to bully me so bad and he felt bad at that point. And I don't know if it was sympathy or I don't know if, he had empathy for the fact that something was physically wrong with me, that it just stopped.
The first time I'm hearing that. Wow. You bring up school and the one thing I do want to share is for parents is that I do remember that although I wasn't present a lot of times, when there was a situation at school,
Oh,
I was there ready to take on the teacher, the principal, the administration, the superintendent. And I share that. It's kind of funny, looking back now, but parents, you have to step up and protect your kids because a lot of times we entrust our schools, our teachers, that what they have to say is the right thing or the decisions they're making are the right thing, but sometimes it's not. And I'm a strong advocate that we as parents have to stand up and fight the school system if we don't agree with it. And if you can just share a little bit about that, because I know when, they definitely crossed the line, I was there and there was hell that was going to happen at that school. And sometimes even in the school district, I remember going to school board meetings and going and just blasting the teachers, the principal, and not letting up and even getting people to petition. So tell me a little about that. I'm sure that was a little embarrassing,
oh,
but
yeah.
do you remember that?
It was more embarrassing for me to be like around the teacher or for teachers, but it actually did make me feel like I had a sense of control when it came to school of like, I didn't have to stand for those things. I didn't have to stand for the mistreatment. Like I had a PE teacher that gave me a C in the class and was failing me because I couldn't run the mile under a certain time, knowing well that I had asthma and my asthma was pretty moderate to severe. It wasn't something that I could just easily control. And when I was getting those failing grades, I mean, you flipped out and you were there. So, I mean, that was one thing where I could count on. And I did feel a little bit more comfortable in that way. I mean, it was embarrassing. I was kind of afraid to see that teacher, but at the same time, I knew like once it happened, once you were there, like, oh no, I don't need to stand for this. Like, I know this isn't right. And she's doing it on purpose, or she's trying to push me or giving me a failing grade. I don't know. I lost my words.
It was a very trying time, but we were able to fight back and get it resolved. And that's the most important thing. It's, as parents, mothers and fathers, we have to stand up for our children, especially when we feel that something's not right and a decision's not being handled fairly.
Well, I think it's very important for kids, no matter what grade they're in, to feel like they have somebody who's going to be there to stand up for them and to protect them, because you're not with your kid all the time. You don't know what's going on unless they tell you. And to have a parent that's involved and is willing to say something, that makes a huge impact on the child and makes them feel like they have a sense of control in all this chaos of being with different peers and maybe people that are older than them and with teachers and bullies. I think that's very essential to a child that's in the school system.
Let's touch on a topic that's very controversial in our household, and that has to do with therapy. And
Fun one.
my thoughts with therapy, when I was in my masculine narcissist personality, I didn't believe in therapy. I pushed and fought and refused to take you guys longest time. And I'm sure that I was the reason that you guys were in therapy for because of a lot of situations and so forth. But tell me about that, because I know those were even up until 3.5 years ago, before I started my journey with plant medicine and finally released the ego. I was still anti-therapy, and to me it was a weakness, but I was just so in my masculine that I was just very clouded in my judgment.
Well, like you can't show emotions or you shouldn't cry, is that a therapist at that time was useless or wasn't helpful. It's not something that you do, that you're supposed to deal with those things on your own. And, I was taught that it's up to you. You have the control over your mind. And if you're feeling these emotions, well, then you should push through them. So that was hard because I probably should have been in therapy when I was a young adolescent, because there was a lot of emotions and a lot of things that I couldn't process. And I couldn't really come to you because you didn't believe in it. And I thought an interesting time was when I started taking psychology for the first time. My first psychology class, my junior year, is when I really started diving into what psychology was. And that's when I started to notice the cracks for what they were. Not just as, oh, this is our family and this is what happens. It was, oh wait, this isn't normal. This is not supposed to be happening. And when I was able to start naming things, and I can remember coming home and then regurgitating information, but then people getting bothered because they're thinking that I'm a know-it-all, but I'm just trying to, in my mind, educate our family. But then I was also kind of getting made fun of it for it, which that was kind of hard because I was getting hardcore made fun of and poked fun at, which just made me want to do it more because I was getting a reaction.
So, parents, if you have a child that is taking any type of classes with psychology, or they are studying psychology at the college level, just know that it's going to make for some very interesting conversations, because I think the tagline is, oh, well, here's the almost clinical version of how you messed us up as a family with a lot of big, drawn out words that sometimes we didn't understand, but the clinical terms. So, yes, that was an interesting time. And yes, sometimes there was anger. Sometimes there was anger and resentment because you're sitting here calling us out, shit, but using it in a clinical term and trying to put the the definition behind it, the concept behind it. And yeah, we didn't like it. We didn't want to hear it. So, yes, I can see that there was a lot of bullying happening at the dinner table when we did sit down for dinner.
That's actually funny. I actually just came to the realization that I was bullied when I took my psychology class, which I just realized that now looking back at it, that I was made fun of, which I didn't realize before. And it was almost like a projection. So I would say something and then it would just get projected back onto me. Or I was just called a know-it-all, or I think I knew these things, which later would come to be words and concepts and topics that would be used. And I'm sitting here like, yeah, I was saying this since I was 17, but yep, I will hear you out. But just with that little bit of just the exposure and wanting to talk about the class, and I don't think that it was specifically in a malice way of trying to it was a little bit of coming at my parents, but at the same time, it was a little bit of, oh, like this directly applies to my life. Like I want to talk about this, but not understanding how much of a wall was there. So by the time I did go into therapy, there was a lot more backlash because you were not open to therapy. My mom was way more open to therapy and knew, that it could have some benefits for me. And I had to work through a lot of stuff in therapy and a lot of traumas that I had to work through from childhood and situations that completely shot my nervous system. And I learned that I was operating in a fight or flight mode most of the time, which is why I was so triggered. And sometimes I still operate like that. And unless you're aware to it, and unless you learn how to take yourself out of it, you remain in it. And you carry all those things with you. And when I was trying to heal, I would say when I really was aware to my first round of trying to work on myself and healing, you would just not have any of it. So you would just talk crap about therapy and my therapist and all this stuff. And what I had to do in therapy was basically accept that you were not going to change and that we would not ever heal because you would not be open to it. And my therapist even asked me, would your father be open to coming in? And I said, no, that's not going to happen. And as gentle as she was to try and explain and ask, and I said, oh, no, that's not going to happen. So we can move on.
Wasn't there a time that I did go in? Was it with you or one of your other sisters?
No,
And
it
it's
wasn't me.
It wasn't with you.
No.
Okay, then it was probably with one of your sisters, and it just was a shit show. But that'll be for another podcast. So we'll stick to your trauma. There's enough trauma to go around in the family. So I had asked your mom before I brought this topic up, but I wanted to talk about, your mom was ill for a lot of years. about 11 or 12 years and used to have seizures and used to pass out. And it happened so frequently that I remember just being irritated with it, like just numb to it. And I remember she would drop down and have a seizure. And I would just walk over her and be like, she's going to wake up eventually. You guys were little kids and you guys would freak out and you guys be worried. And I know that impacted you guys. And I didn't remember that till she brought it up today when I was just kind of sharing with her what was okay to share. And she said, no, that was something that really impacted, you and your sisters. Wanted to see if you could brush on that a little. Because sometimes, especially when you're a father and such you're masculine, you tend to push off the sickness and illnesses that are happening with your children or wife, etc.
So when it came to my mom, she was sick for a long time. And I really got to see both sides of my mom. So I got to see her at her best and her most active and involved self. And I also seen the decline of her to her barely living her life, which was hard, especially in the beginning because I was younger. This happened, really it all started going downhill when I started high school. And I had younger sisters who were still in elementary school. So of course, I'm barely getting information to understand this thing and what it is. So of course my sisters are really not understanding. And there was no education. And I would look back and go, man, I don't understand it because you're such an educated person and you study all these different things and you teach all these things, but yet you couldn't learn about what it was. You couldn't learn about how to help her. It's like you didn't want to know because you didn't want to accept it. And that's one of the things that we struggled with because I would be worried and to the point where I'd be so stressed out that I would just demand things. And it would happen so frequently that we kind of just had to be on guard and we would understand. And I would start learning her tells to when it was going to happen. And we would just hope that she was going to fall backwards, not forwards. It's not funny, but it was an actual concern because sometimes she did go forwards or she'd go sideways and you'd be like, oh shit, we didn't catch her. Like it was a concern, because I'd have to wake her up and say, you didn't go the way that I thought you were going to go. Like, I'm sorry. I can remember one time she fell on top of my sister because she was trying to catch her. And I was like, why were you trying to catch her? You had no chance. You're tiny. So it was things like that. And still during that time, you weren't around. You were working. So it was almost like we were dealing with it on our own. And when that would happen, my sisters would freak out to the next level. And I didn't understand how to manage that because nobody taught me. The person that probably would have taught me was on the ground, passed out. There was nobody else there. So I would be managing two sisters that are freaking out and are yelling. So of course I would get upset and I would yell back at them. And sometimes we would end up arguing over my mom being passed out on the floor because I didn't understand how to handle those situations. And then it got to the point where it just became so frequent that it was just normal. And it would bother me when you would do things like continue to get a glass of water and then walk away. Or just say, oh, just leave her, she's fine. I don't think you ever really understood how to handle the situation. Because I know that I for sure learned. I learned what to do. I learned what was routine. I knew to take a clip out of her hair and make sure that there was water ready for her and to stay by her side and make sure that she doesn't hit her head. And I knew those things to check for. I knew when she was gonna faint sometimes because she had those tells because I was around it so much. And I think what I did with all that emotion is I turned it into it's almost like nervousness, like funniness, or just trying to make light of the situation because I didn't know what else to do. So I would do my best to make her laugh when she would come to it because that's just the way that I was able to process those emotions. So, I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but I would be one of the only people that can make her laugh as soon as she came out of fainting. I mean, I'd have her cracking up that her head would hurt. because I would be making some type of joke. I'd be like, Mom, if you want attention, you should have just said something. You don't have to fall. But it was the way that I learned how to process the situation.
And I know a big part for me was that I was in denial. And I remember saying something to you, and this was brought up just in the last couple of years, that I really was a shift, one of those trauma points that really shifted our relationship. And that was me just telling you to get over it. This is the way your mom is. This is the way she's going to be. So just accept it and move on.
Well, you said your mom's never going to get better. She's always going to be sick. So to hear that as a teenager is a lot. That's a lot to process, because I was the one that always held hope, and I was the one of, well, there's so many doctors in the world, and there's all these treatments. So even though I may have not been educated, for me, that was just never a bottom line for me. There was always a possibility that she could get better, but to have your own dad tell you that your mom is going to stay sick and she's never going to get better, of course I started having resentment towards you, because it was like you didn't even want to deal with it. You weren't even there. So that was a big shift, because I no longer felt that I could come to you and talk to you about it, nonetheless tell you how I felt about it or the type of emotions that I was dealing with, because you were just closed off.
So I know there was a situation that really shifted the relationship. And just want to kind of set the context for what happened. And why I think this really shifted the dynamics of our relationship forever. And I think it's something we're still healing. And that was you being little girls. And big joke was always, can we unlock my dad's phone? Because I was so secretive about my phone. And I was always trying to guess my password. One day I'm laying in the jacuzzi, the Mandalay Bay, relaxing in my bathtubs with my bubbles and so forth. My phone's off to the side, and you guys grab my phone and go to unlock it, and holy crap. On that day, you guys guessed the password right and unlocked it. And then what started was a down here journey, seeing some Texas, someone that wasn't your mom, and some pictures. I remember being so angry, I blamed you for it. Blamed you that, oh, you're gonna ruin us, you're gonna ruin this family. Why did you unlock my phone? And putting a lot of blame towards you. Do you remember that? Do you remember how you felt? Is that where our relationship shifted?
I remember that vividly. So that memory is in color for me. So yes, I was the one who was joking and unlocked it. And I was also the one that got the phone taken from me by my mom. And that's when that whole situation happened. And you came out and realized, and you got really angry. And I kind of hid in the bathroom and just listened to the arguing, and just shit hit the fan, like big time. And I just remember getting blamed. Not even, there's no way that you can sugarcoat it. There's no way that you can say it any other ways. It was straight that this is your fault. And because of you, because you did this, there's going to be a lot of changes in our family. And I'm crying while you're telling me these things. No empathy, no nothing, just straight anger for something that I didn't even mean to do. And how was I to know what the fuck you were doing?
And is that, because there's such thing as trauma that happens, there's situations that cause trauma that stay with children. Even as adults, we experience trauma, and then we experience the after effects, sometimes physically, psychologically, emotionally. Do you think that's where you kind of painted the picture now? I hate my dad.
Oh yeah, I had a lot of resentment. At that point, I was a teenager. I was in those teenage years, and as it is, those are rocky. And I was starting to speak out a little bit more, but after that, I just no longer cared, and I thought our family was a joke. It's kind of like everything that I thought just was real. That picture of who I thought you were, who I thought our family was just gone in seconds. So I no longer cared, because I can remember getting back from that Vegas trip and the rooms getting moved around for whatever reason. All of a sudden, mom and dad's room is now back upstairs. And I'm just like, this is a fucking joke. And at that point, I really started rebelling because I just no longer cared. And I no longer cared about the relationship because you blamed me and it wasn't my fault. And I knew that, but I still processed it in a way that I kept the blame on myself. And that's why after that, I no longer trusted you. I no longer trusted any women that were in your life. I was always super critical, even into my early 20s, coming into the office where you'd work, meeting new women that would work with you or under you. I was a bitch to them. I was a total bitch. I can remember meeting someone for the first time that I didn't even know that I knew as a child and saying, oh my God. She said, I remember when you were little. And I said, oh, it's cool. Do you know my mom? And when they said, no, I never met your mom, I walked away. And I was like, okay, well, then I don't care for you. It was things like that. And I learned to no longer trust men.
So from that one incident, you developed a series of emotions and trauma that stayed with you.
The thing that people get wrong about trauma is thinking that they're the dramatic things, that they're have to be really traumatic, that they have to really be bad things to be considered as traumas, but they're not. Traumas happen all the time in families, like getting blamed for something that your father did, or maybe an argument or a fight, or even a move, being pulled out of a school and into another one. That's a traumatic experience because you're being taken away from everything that you know and you're getting put somewhere else. So of course things like that can hold weight, and they can definitely impact your development, and they can impact you as a person. I mean, it definitely impacted my view of you and our relationship.
We're now 27 years into your life, and we've started the process of healing. How long do you think we've been working on our relationship? Because I know there was a time where we didn't talk for about 4 or 5 years. And I was very angry at you for some decisions that you made. And I think I accidentally pushed you down the stairs. Unintentionally. Maybe it was intentional.
I forgot about that. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold on.
Oops. Okay.
Actually,
maybe we didn't. Can we edit
now
that?
that I think about that,
we edit that.
you did push me down the stairs.
Oh.
Well, I think you were angry at me for making the decisions because you saw some reflections that you didn't like, and you seen some cycles being repeated that I was drawn to and went forward with them.
So I think it's fair to say, if I can just expose it, as you were dating, an older man, and he was a narcissist also. And I saw right through him. And because of that, I basically demanded that you stop seeing him. Instead of you stopping, it went the opposite way, which caused me to throw you out the house. And at that point, we were dead to each other for the next couple of years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was your decision to make that a thing of, well, then you're going to get kicked out of the house. And there's nothing that I could do about that. And because I just didn't care about the relationship, and it had already been explosive between me and you, it was like a ticking time bomb, whether, we're civil and then we're arguing and we're fighting and then we're civil for some time, that I just didn't care because of all the stuff that accumulated over time. I cared less, and I said, well, I'm going to rebel, and I'm going to go do this thing that my dad's telling me not to, and I'm just going to go live my life. And to me, you were just the asshole trying to control me. And what I didn't see was that a cycle was being repeated, and I was drawn to this person because they were part of a reflection of you. And so that was normal to me.
And I know one of your famous lines throughout the years was, I will fight you. Like, I don't back down. I'll fight you. And we would literally get into fist fights.
Well, I still tell people, I don't care who you are. Like, I will fight you. And I tell people, like, if I'm not scared of my dad, I'm not scared of you. So try me.
So parents, if you be careful if you put your kids in Taekwondo and karate, because they develop this sense of courage, and then they will fight you. Like literally, physically, they'll fight you. But let me lighten the mood a little bit, and talk to you about this before we go into table flipping and Monopoly and all this other fun stuff. Poopy, my precious little Poopy. So
I don't have him.
Well,
Because you're
that's still
asking.
questionable.
Okay, I don't have him.
So
Clear.
I was gifted a doll by my mom, a little teddy bear, when I was born. His name was Poopy, and he's been with me all my life. Up until 3 years ago, he disappeared. And the joke was always, well, I was reminded that he was such a important component to my childhood that I would get angry when your sisters would torment him. They would hide him. They would dress him up. They would
hang him from the balcony.
And I would get very angry. Like it wasn't even, they were doing it in a joking way because you guys were kids but to me, I took that as it just infuriated me. Like, this is my childhood, doll, and you guys are tormenting it. And I remember one time you hung it from a balcony, and in a fit of rage, I threw your bed out the second-story window and a bunch of other stuff. And it wasn't even out of being funny or joking. I was pissed. I was pissed that you took my little Poopy and you guys were tormenting him. And I remember throwing all your shit out the second-story window.
Oh, yeah. My clothes, my sheets, everything was going out the window. That's all I remember. Cause me one time, I thought I was smart and hiding in the shower, but then you turned on the shower and then you closed the door so I couldn't get out because it was a glass door. There was quite a bit of backlash that we got anytime touched, especially me, anytime I touched that doll.
Yeah, so parents, if you have a childhood doll, please learn to release it because it's only a doll. But to me, it was just a part of my childhood. It was actually my safety net. It was my safety blanket is what it was. Being that it was, because you guys knew that it was so special to me, you guys used to torture him. And I remember him even being kidnapped and those ransom notes and having to get him back. So it's been like a lifelong journey of kidnappings and him being held for ransoms. And he's been gone for 3 years. And that's something I'm still trying to get to the bottom of. So one day I will find him and I will get to the bottom of who stole my Poopy.
Oh, well, just so you know, I hope you do find. I actually don't have. When I thought about it, I was actually really sad that he wasn't around anymore. And if I would have found him, I did want to take him and make light of the fact that I had him, but more like I wanted to take him out to the beach and take him over here and not really ransom him or torment him now. But if you think about it, it was kind of like we were trying to be part of your childhood. I don't know if you see it that way, but you have this doll that's special to you and you hold on to it. And we wanted to poke fun and we wanted to mess around with you. But you took it to a whole nother level of just getting upset over it. And that caused many of my stuff being thrown out or broken.
Or broken. Yeah, you put it into that context. Wow. Really hits me because you just put it in a different way. To me, I thought you guys were it was your way of getting back at me, but it was your way of kind of reliving my childhood. So definitely something I'm going to sit and meditate on. Oh, yes, go ahead.
To answer your question, I think we've been actively healing for only about 1.5 years.
So, plant medicine, ayahuasca, lots of it. Lots of it for your dad. Lots of mushroom ceremonies, bufo, wachuma. I started my awakening in February 2020, right before the pandemic, and went. It's when I was able to have my ego death and open my heart and experience tears and crying. And I remember coming back in a very, very happy place, full of love and with my heart open. And I remember the fights that we would have, or the fights that you would have with me coming back and not wanting to deal with the past, just wanting to confront you guys, apologize, and then let's move on. But I know that this was something that you struggled with for probably the first year and a half, as I was starting my journey into just being a better person and shedding that narcissist behavior and that ego and that such strong, dominant masculine. You want to share a little bit on that?
It was very inconsiderate the way that you came back. And I fought you so hard because it wasn't fair that you got to go have these experiences and you got to go release all that trauma and go through it and then be in a better place. And yet we're still left here with all the pieces on the ground and you're just not willing to even address them. You just want to kind of overlook them and pack it away and move on like everything was fine, and it wasn't. And the reason why we struggled for so long and our healing wasn't progress is because you couldn't accept that you have to go back and you have to work through those things in order to move forward. And it can't just be you. You have to actively work on that. So, of course, I didn't believe you at first, and I thought it was total bullshit. And then, secondly, the second wave of anger came.
Well, I think your words were, you joined a cult, you're fucking crazy. My dad's lost it.
He's done witchcraft. Yeah, those are my words. And then when I realized that it was actually legit and I did some research, and I actually started to see you in a little bit of a different light, that's when my second wave of anger hit, because it wasn't fair to me that you got to be peaceful and you got to work through these things and you're just enjoying your life when we're still in the midst of all the trauma. And there's still so much shit going on in my life that I don't have control over, that's in part because of you and the way that you raised me and the influences that you put in me that made me make these decisions, and thus I created my life.
And how do we move on from here? So I know we've started our journey of healing the last year and a half. And it's beautiful that we talk every day. Every day that you're on your way to work. Some days are better than others. And it's just a delicate tightrope that we're both learning to maneuver through. And I think there's still a lot of bumps. And I think there's still a process of forgiving each other, just like there's a lot of anger and resentment I think you still hold towards me. And the same, that I feel like I've released it, but sometimes you're able to pull out that dark side and just bring it back to the surface. For parents that are coming back from starting the process of healing with plant medicine or therapy or whatever it is that works for them, and now confronting, I'm going to say victims, your children, your significant others, your wife, your husbands. What would you recommend that someone that's starting their journey do to help heal the process? And I know that's a difficult one because there's so many different ways, but what could I have done differently that could have maybe started the process a lot sooner? Because I'm 3.5 years into my journey, and it's only the last year and a half that we're just starting to repair ours. It took some time. It wasn't like just go take some ayahuasca, do some mushrooms, and boom, we're healed. No, it got worse before it got better.
I think the most important thing is that if you're really going to commit to it and you're going to try to heal those relationships, is you can't be afraid to be vulnerable, and you have to put everything out there, and you have to be willing to accept what you've done wrong. Even if they don't seem wrong to you, but you need to understand that what you've done has impacted those people around you. And those people closest to you have taken on the biggest impacts and consequences from.
I think something that was very powerful for me as a father was when you would write me these letters and you would express just all your anger and pain and hurt. And hearing it was one thing, but when you wrote it down, it really took, it impacted on a whole different level. And I would encourage mothers and fathers that are trying to heal their relationship with their children to not always express it verbally, but definitely sit down and write your thoughts out on paper, because that can have a more powerful impact, because especially the ego can kick in. And sometimes we're listening, but we're not really listening because we're thinking about what we want to say next. But when you have that letter in hand, you have no choice but to read it and then digest it, and then you'll read it again, and then you'll read it again. So those letters were actually comforting for me to start my process of healing with you.
Well, I think that can be very helpful for children or for significant others or whoever's around you to be able to write things down, write the way they feel, the way that things impacted them, and understand that in order to move forward, you're going to have to confront the past, and you're going to have to be ready, honestly, to be blamed for a lot of things, and to openly and genuinely accept it and also apologize instead of just trying to push it off and say, well, that's the past and I'm not there anymore, so we just need to move forward.
So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here with our healing process? Because I'd like to fast track it to get to a better place. What do we have to do?
It's going to take time. It still stay in communication and maybe spend some more time together and have some more open discussions and talk through some more things. It's going to take effort on both parts to not go back to the place of being frustrated and lash out, and maybe it'll take you to not get angry in a casino and yell at me and embarrass me. That's a good start.
So, are we ever going to get to a point where we're ever going to be able to play Monopoly and not have the game flipped?
Well, I can play Monopoly and not flip it. Can you play Monopoly and not flip it?
So, I know board games were not something, board games were something we played in the house, but they always ended so bad. The game ended so bad. And
that's because you're a sore loser.
But I've never lost a Monopoly. So
exactly, that's the problem. Is that
lost.
You think you've never lost at Monopoly, so that's why the board would end up flipped. Then we would all be mad and say, yeah, no, we're just going to flip the board because this is what we learned you can do.
Well, no, because I'm in real estate. So
no.
That's my expertise. So that's why I never lose a Monopoly. But
it's not a market crash. That's just a board being flipped.
So it's funny because you mentioned something in your podcast was that, we went from years of not playing Monopoly because it was actually a very touchy subject. Like it wasn't even, we sit here and we laugh about it, but we literally could not play Monopoly. And now I think there's 7 or 8 Monopoly boards in the home. There's Friends and Care Bears and Electronic Monopoly and Original Monopoly. And I think we have Target Monopoly.
Bridgerton Monopoly.
Bridgerton Monopoly. I think we even have like Victorville or Hesperia Monopoly. Ranch Cucamonga Monopoly.
But here's the thing. We don't actually play them like all the time or ever. It's just like the freedom of being able to have that board game in the house and know that nobody's going to mess with it or mess it up. Or if you take it out, no one's going to be flipping the board. And,
it's almost like all those Monopolies stacked up on top of each other is almost like a shrine. It's almost like a shrine of healing. It's where we come and we walk by and we look at it and go like, we don't have to play it, but we just know that in those board games, there's just a lot of pain and trauma that's being left there. Stay away from Monopoly.
Yeah, I can see that.
So just in closing, like I said, thank you for coming on. So this was beautiful to start the process of just sharing, because there's a lot of people that are going through what we're going through, and that's the process of healing and being able to share a little bit of our story, because there is a lot more, but this is just kind of scratching the surface. And my goal for this is that people that feel like they don't have hope, because to be quite honest, and I'm sure you feel the same way, I did not think this relationship was repairable. I think we're at a point where we were at the point of no return. And it didn't matter who intervened, nobody was going to bring us back together. Something that just had to happen. Time?
Oh, yeah. No, at one point you were dead to me. And I honestly didn't really care what happened to you. Like at all. And to think that now makes me sad. And it would make me emotional to think that way. But yeah, I mean, at some point, I just did not care for you at all. And somehow things happened for a reason. And we came back together explosively, then slowly. But honestly, if we can do it, other people could do it. Because we were two fireballs that were constantly fighting with each other. Any chance that we had, any outing, any birthday, anything, there would be something small to trigger and everything would blow up from there.
I think more like nuclear reactors.
More like, I'm really surprised we never got the cops called on us.
Yes.
Well, I would say, because that would have been the next level. And that's the thing, is that I thought that at some point we would have, and somehow we didn't.
I think a couple of times they did come, but I was quick to leave before, and then you guys didn't answer the door. So,
Right.
Wow. Lost my train of thought with you sharing that. You know, one of the things that I encourage fathers and mothers to do, and especially fathers, is to do a dinner date once a year with your son or daughter. And we started a tradition when you were in high school. And
it was in college.
You were in college. Oh, your first year in college? No.
My first year in college.
Because we've done 9, 10. No, it's in high school.
No, it wasn't. I was 18 when I started college.
18. Okay, so it was, so your first year in college, we started something where we would go to father-daughter dinner every year on Pearl Harbor Day. And that started because you had an assignment to do. And I believe we went over to Claremont College to go see a recital. And it was on Pearl Harbor Day. And then we said, hey, we should make this an annual tradition. So fathers, I encourage you, especially if you have daughters, to plan a day once a year where you go out and you have a dinner and just go out there and just be able to talk. No judgment, share, and really just have meaningful conversations. Now, the one thing I do remember is, even though we didn't talk,
Just going to say that.
we did respect that. What's the word I'm looking for? We did respect.
We respected the tradition.
The tradition, exactly, the tradition.
Somehow, someway, even through all the chaos, even when I could talk to my dad no time during the year, but for whatever reason, it was always that dinner that I looked forward to, because one, I knew I was eating good, and some were fancy because that's the way we liked it. And I knew that I could get dressed up. And that was part of the fun for me, was going out and trying these different places. And I think that it came from you continuing to try and make this a thing, even if I was bothered or annoyed, or I'd say, oh, I got to go to dinner with my dad. But in a way, I still look forward to it because you held that tradition, which made me hold it up. So somehow we still ended up going, even if we didn't talk, because there were some dinners that were just us eating and kind of looking around, and then that was a dinner, and slowly over years it started evolving into just small talk, and then a little bit more sharing, and until it turned into deeper conversations.
Yeah, and I think your mom was a big part of that to kind of keep the tradition intact, because we were already a couple of years in when we stopped talking. And that's why I think tradition is very important for fathers with daughters, fathers with sons, mothers with daughters or sons, etc., is to respect that tradition that you have. Even if you're not talking, even if you're in a bad place, because even though I didn't want to go, but really I did deep down inside, but I wasn't going to show it. And, now hearing from you that you look forward to it, even when we hated each other and we're pretty much dead to each other, at least that was the one time where we could meet up and just be in each other's company. And even if we didn't talk, I remember a very uncomfortable one was at the Pines at Yamava, Samuel all the time. And I don't think we said more than 3 to 5 words the whole dinner. But we went, we had dinner. I don't even think we hugged. I think we just sat down, we had our dinner, and then okay, we'll see you next year. That was dinner.
Yeah,
that literally was dinner. Like, we were just we're so the same in a lot of ways. And we weren't going to budge. Like, I wasn't going to budge and you weren't going to budge. And we just missed out on so much time, so many memories. And, for me as a father, I look back and it's my pride and ego that kept me from wanting to heal the relationship. And I wasn't there for you through a lot of turbulent times, a lot of emotional times, a lot of trauma. And for that, I regret. I live in regret. That's one of the biggest regrets I have is fighting for our relationship. Yeah. Just that what I was definitely wanted to share. But wow, this has been a emotional and for me powerful, talk today with you. Any closing thoughts?
For parents that are trying to heal their relationship with their children, I'd say especially when it comes to the children, to just give them time. Don't expect it to happen right away, even if you really want it to. Be prepared to have some hard conversations and to take whatever it is that they're going to throw at you. I mean, there is definitely a line of respect, but you also need to understand that if you cross somebody's boundaries and their respect, then you have to earn that again. Because, I mean, I can remember I had no respect for you, which is why I just didn't care for you. Now that respect has been earned back, but it's going to take patience and it's going to take openness. And sometimes it's going to take giving your child that space to process, but just to let them know that you're still there. And that might be a lack of seeing them, a lack of conversations, or being able to participate in certain things. But you just have to trust in the process, that just by always trying, because my biggest thing was I never wanted you to stop trying, because that's what made the biggest impact. So you can't stop trying.
And wow, that hits home in my heart, but it also hits because I have a few friends that are going through turmoil right now with their relationship with their kids, and they haven't spoken for a few years. And I remember you sharing that with some of them, and then with me, that the biggest hurt you had was that I stopped trying and you wanted me to try. And hearing that, because we were in a very dark place, a very bad place, but just to know that even though we were in this dark place, you still wanted your father to still keep trying. And I think that's a powerful message that you're sharing with other fathers and also mothers, is that even if you are in that bad place with your children, to not stop trying. Because deep down inside, you're still just a little girl or little boy inside.
You can't be afraid to put yourself out there. And it's very scary, especially when it comes to your kids, because if you think about it, they know you more than a lot of people do. I mean, they grew up with you. They stood with you through your evolvement as a person. And it's so essential that you just continue to try and allow space where it needs to be, but to also let your children know that within that space that you give them, that you're always going to be there. Because eventually one day, kind of like what happened to me, if they know that you're there, they'll call on you. When they need you, they'll call.
Fatherhood, breaking the toxic cycle. Another beautiful episode as me and my daughter continue our process of healing our relationship from childhood into adulthood. So what